We're down in the barns with Dr. Chris Grossenbacher, a vet here for TheStable.ca. Chris, how long have you been practicing medicine?
I've been a vet for 13 years.
And have you been enjoying it?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to talk a little bit about some terms that are used in the racing industry working on race horses. The first one that we're going to talk about is bleeding. So if Anthony has said this horse is bleeding, what does that mean?
So when we talk about a horse that is bleeding, it's typically refers to a horse that's bleeding in their lungs. It's a condition that race horses get. Thoroughbreds certainly more severe than standardbreds, but we see a lot of standardbreds as well that bleed. So we have an accumulation of blood in their lungs. The reasons why they bleed can be, there's many different reasons why they can start bleeding. Allergies is one of them, sickness is one of them, and those are probably the main two. Part of the problem complex there is as well that as soon as a horse bleeds, it tends to bleed often and tends to start bleeding more. There's some medications that we can use for bleeding, not breathing. Bleeding medications include the horse can be put on Lasix, which is marked in the program as well.
What is flipping a palate?
When a horse flips its palate, it's part of the soft palate that gets caught in the airway, and basically the horse is running out of air. We can treat that by changing the rigging of the horse, putting some equipment on. We can also try and influence a few things by, for example, injecting the palate, but those are probably just Band-Aid at the end of the day, and that's that.
What about tying up?
When a horse ties up, the muscle metabolism, basically the muscles get sour and the muscle start to hurt. It's usually in their back. Mares are much more prone than colts. Geldings occasionally affected as well. Typically, there's some medications that we have to put them on or can put them on, a little bit of rest, and they usually recover quite nicely. We usually diagnose that by a blood test. We take a test, we look at a few values. There's a couple values. One of them is called the CK and the other one is called the AST, that get quite high. As soon as they tie up, they get quite high, and they usually take about a week to get back to normal.
How would you diagnose and treat a bow tendon?
Bow tendons typically, you look at the leg, you see swelling over the tendon, you can feel the tendon. The tendon feels hot and usually painful and enlarged. One thing you then do is you take the ultrasound, you ultrasound the horse and see what you can see on the ultrasound. There's usually, if you see a big black hole, then you know what you're dealing with. And then the trick with treating those things, there's a fairly long period of time. You have to rest the horse. You have to get some blood flow in the area. You can do that by blistering a horse, or you can do that by cryoing a horse. You can do that by shock waving a horse. You can get really fancy and put stem cells into a leg. But typically, the only thing that's really going to help is going to be time, and they will recover. Or unfortunately, there's some that will not.
What is a suspensory?
Suspensory, basically there's two things we refer to as a suspensory. It's like a tendon on the back of their leg. It has a similar function as a tendon. Basically the suspensory it's just the structure that we refer to that as well. Usually when Anthony talks about the suspensory, he's talking about a suspensory that is injured, which goes kind of in the same area as a bow tendon. Same general idea. You look at the tendon, you feel the tendon, you ultrasound the suspensory or the tendon, and then again get blood in the area, get the suspensory either blistered or cryoed or shocked, and mainly give it time.
How do we tell the difference between lines and fractures?
Basically, we're looking at an X-ray of a horse that's obviously gone lame. If we see a fracture on an X-ray, it's usually a bone that has some displacement with a line through it. The first stage of those fractures, or the less severe form of those fractures, are lines, when we basically just see a tiny little line going through the bone. Fractures in certain locations need to be treated with screws, etc. lines usually will recover if we just put the horse on rest and go from there and recheck with an x-ray and basically recheck until the fractures disappeared and then go from there.
Thank you so much for all of your explanations on what we went over. One more thing, what is your favorite part about being a vet?
Well, it's certainly rewarding when you have a horse that had difficulties and you can help the horse and the trainers and owners to get back to success and make it a successful career.